Hey everyone, my name is Chelsea. Welcome to Little Mountain Ranch and welcome back to my kitchen. I'm very happy to have you here with me today. Today I'm going to be sharing with you a video that I filmed a little while ago. You will notice in that video that the kitchen looks quite different than it does right now. And since I've been filming in my kitchen for the last couple of videos, I thought it might be kind of confusing to throw up a video in which the kitchen looks entirely different. So that is the reason why. It is because it is a video that I filmed prior to this renovation. So without further ado, let's get into it and I'll see you in this kitchen in the next video. Bye guys. Today I'm going to be making a sweet bread and butter pickle, and I'm going to be pickling cucumbers and gorgeous, gorgeous cauliflower and sweet onions. And the recipe that I'm using is actually just the recipe off of the back of Clubhouse Pickling Spice. I've used this recipe for a couple of years now and I've tried tons of different ones. This one is by far the best in my opinion, and I'll make sure that I put that down or above or below. I'm not sure how that's going to show up on the blog post, but I'll make sure I put the recipe there for you. So some of the tricks that I've learned over the years of canning that have saved me some grief, I'm just going to run through those first. The first is the use of vinegar in your canning water. If you have hard water at all, or any minerals or anything like that in your water, and you add just a couple tablespoons of vinegar to it, so this is for your actual canner. So in your actual canner, add a couple of tablespoons to your water, and that will completely eliminate any hard water staining, which is awesome because there's nothing worse than putting all this work into making beautiful canned products and then having white scaly all over it. If you do forget, which I do from time to time, you can actually put vinegar on a cloth and wash the outside of your jars, and that will get rid of it too. Some of my favorite canning tools are the Starfrit canning kit. This was only, I think, about 20 bucks or something like that. And I love, love, love these. They're super good quality. But the thing that I love about this funnel the most is the fact that you can fit it over top of your jar like so. But because it has an edge around both sides, unlike a metal funnel like this one that doesn't have kind of the edge, this actually covers the top of your jar, which is super handy because that way when you're putting your product into your jar, you don't get all of the sticky gunk all over the edge. You do want to wash off the edge of your jars anyway, just because if there is anything sticky, it can affect your seal, but this makes it so much easier. And then one of these little grabber things for your jars. I have been canning for, I think, something like 20 years, at least as an adult. I canned with my mom when I was a kid too, but I actually just used an oven mitt and burnt the tips of my fingers for a really long time until I finally just put out the investment to buy these. And like I said, the kit for this was only $20, somewhere in that range. And it also came with a little stick with a magnet on it for pulling your lids out, and I don't use that, so I am not going to recommend that. But these two things here are fantastic. And you have probably heard about the importance of sterilizing. I am a big proponent of following safety guidelines when it comes to canning. I personally mess around with recipes a bit just because I've been canning for long enough that I know what is required for safety, but when it comes to sterilizing, I always sterilize. So for my lids, like these, I just stick the lids and the rings, and then I boil those for 10 minutes. You don't actually have to sterilize the rings because they don't come into contact with the food itself, but because I'm boiling the lids anyway, I just throw the rings in there. I sterilize my actual jars in two different ways. One of the ways is by putting them in the oven for usually about an hour. I'll throw them in there at the beginning at 225 degrees Fahrenheit at the beginning of all of my prep, and then by the time I'm done, they're well sterilized. Or you can run them through your dishwasher on the sterilized setting and just leave them in there till you're ready to use them, and that will also work. I have been asked often whenever anybody sees me canning whether it's safe to can on a glass top stove. I have been canning on a glass top stove forever. The only thing that you want to keep in mind when you're doing it is that you want to lift everything straight up. You don't want to drag it across because it's quite heavy and you will scratch your glass surface. I have used a larger canner than this one. This one I think is a 6-quart canner, and I have a 9-quart as well, and I've never had any problems with the weight of it breaking the glass or anything like that. So that's just my experience on that one. The nice thing about this recipe is you can mess around with the actual vegetables that you are putting in. The thing that you cannot mess around with when you are canning pickles is the amount of vinegar that your recipe calls for to the amount of vegetables that you're going to be using. That is where you can get into issues with safety, but you can play around a little bit with the vegetables you're using. So in this case, I am using cauliflower, and these are all out of my garden. It makes me so happy. And cucumbers, which just started coming in yesterday. And sweet white onions, that's what I'm using, but you could use pearl onions, you could use red onions, you could use a higher ratio of cauliflower to cucumbers or vice versa. And you can also add in peppers if you want. I'm not going to today only because this is the largest pepper from my greenhouse right now, but I don't have enough to really make it worthwhile. Red peppers are really nice in this because they're sweet. So you can play around with that a little bit, but don't mess around with the actual recipe as far as the ratio of vinegar. That's really important. It does call for white sugar. You can use organic cane sugar if you want. I do not worry that much about using a little bit of refined white sugar, because I have just found over the years that if I worry about every single little thing that I am doing in my kitchen, I will drive myself completely insane. So all of the vegetables that I'm using are grown in my garden, and I grow organically, so I figure that's good enough. So you are going to need some kind of little sachet to be able to put your herbs in. I will put a list of the spices and herbs that are in this mix in case you want to make your own. And so you want that just because you don't want all of these little hard, kind of not delicious little bits of spices and stuff in your actual pickles. This does have mustard seed in it, but the recipe calls for a little bit of extra mustard seed, as well as some, that's not celery salt, wait a second, celery salt. And you can also add turmeric, which I am going to do because I like the yellow of just the way that it colors everything. So you can use turmeric, or you can omit it if you want. You need some white vinegar. If you prefer apple cider vinegar, you could use apple cider vinegar if you want. And then, like I said, you also need sugar. We need 20 cups of cucumbers. And the nice thing about sweet pickles is that you don't have to worry if your pickles are getting a little bit larger like this. Ideally, for making pickles, you want nice small ones because they are crunchier, but because this is a sweet pickle and we're going to be slicing it this way anyway, it doesn't really matter. So you are going to want to have about 20 cups of cucumbers, or about 40 cucumbers. So that's what we have here. These are just going to all need to be washed up. If you are growing pickling cucumbers yourself, it'll take a few days for you to get the number that you need. You want to have them be as crisp as possible. So the thing that I find really works is to put them in a Ziploc bag, wash them, put them in a Ziploc bag, and then put them in the fridge, and they'll stay nice and firm for a few days so that you can collect up your pickles until you have enough. You are going to need around 9 cups of sweet onions, or 9 cups of pearl onions, a head of cauliflower, and around 40 pickling cucumbers, or 20 cups of sliced pickling cucumbers. We are using our food processor to cut up the onions because these onions are so hot and they burn our eyes. We're using the slicing option for that so that they're nice thin slices, but long slices. We really like in our pickles to have long slices of onions in there to put on things like hamburgers and hot dogs and that kind of thing. So we are going to get these all sliced up, and then for the pickling cucumbers, I'm just going to wash them really well, and then those we will cut up by hand just because they're pretty easy to slice up by hand. And you want them fairly thin, but not as thin as they would be if you're going to run them through the food processor. This is the one step that's a little bit more time consuming, just the prep work, as it is with most things canning. One of the ingredients I forgot was pickling salt, and that is just for this prep piece of it. One of the things that you want to try to do is get rid of some of the extra water in your onions and your cucumbers, and that helps them to be just a crisper pickle. After these are all sliced up and the pickles are all sliced up, we're gonna stick them in a large bowl, sprinkle 1/3 of a cup of pickling salt over the top, put a plate on top and even a little added weight if you can, and let them sit for 30 minutes. The longer the better, but you can get away with 30 minutes. And because I only have a short window of time today, that is what I am going to do. So we will get going with all of this prep. Okay, I will mention one more thing about pickles. When you are making pickles, you have two ends on your pickle, the stem end and then the flower end here. This flower end has an enzyme in it that if you don't cut it off, it will make your pickles softer and soggier. This is particularly important if you're making dill pickles, but just always slice off that end. And you guys haven't seen Caitlin for a while.
Hi.
Okay, you're gonna get on those, I will get on these.
Oh man, these are so hot, Mom.
They're so brutal.
I haven't even done anything. I see.
They're so bad. Oh my goodness. Do you want to go get some goggles?
I don't know. I feel like it's already past the point like
where it matters.
Yeah.
This is gonna be so bad anyway. One of the things that turns people off about eating farm grown, well, all vegetables are farm grown, but homegrown cauliflower and broccoli is the fact that oftentimes you will get cabbage worms up inside of here. So one of the ways that you can avoid that, you can't really avoid that, but one of the ways you can avoid eating those worms is by breaking up the head and soaking it for 20 minutes in a sink full of water with a little bit of salt in it. And then the worms, kind of sounds gross, but they'll just float to the top and you just scoop them out and then at least you're not eating them. So most homegrown food you have to do something like that with. When I first started gardening on a larger scale, I think it's probably about 16 years ago now, I was so proud because I grew this huge garden and I had broccoli and cauliflower and lettuce and all of this stuff. But I didn't know a lot about the bugs in the vegetables. So I made my husband a really big salad to bring to work, and I was so proud of it, and it was all homegrown. And he came home and he just kind of had this funny expression on his face and he's like, so did you wash those vegetables before you put them in my salad? And I'm like, yeah, I did. And he opened it up and I don't know, I mean, in my memory there was probably 6 worms, but maybe there was just 1 or 2, but in my memory there was tons of them and there were worms on the salad. And I think he was traumatized, and for years afterwards he was a little bit paranoid about eating vegetables out of the garden. He's good now because I've got the whole washing thing down, but he brings up that story all the time. It makes me laugh. You know the story?
Yes, the broccoli salad story.
Yes, exactly. Okay, well that Kate is running those onions through, I don't have all of the pickles chopped quite yet, but in the meantime I'm going to get the brine happening. Where did I put my cheesecloth? Did you see where I put the little square cheesecloth? Oh, there it is.
Right, yeah, you tie it. Remember to take it out.
Yes. Kate's just reminding me about how last year I forgot to take this out, and so there was a jar of pickles that was very strong because it had this in it. So I've just poured it in here, and then I am going to tie the top of this like so. And make sure, make sure that you tie it nice and tight so that you don't end up with any of your spices coming out, like so. If you're one of those organized people that has twine in your kitchen, then you can tie the top of it with twine too, but I am not one of those people. So I will throw that in there. I'm gonna double the recipe for the brine just because I don't want to get to the end and not have enough brine. So that's 6 cups of white vinegar. The recipe calls for a lot of sugar. So for every 3 cups of vinegar that you use 5 cups of sugar. But keep in mind, this is a condiment, and that's what I always think about when I'm making anything that calls for a lot of sugar, like jam, jelly, pickles, relish, or anything like that. You're not using a lot of it, and in this case, most of what you're having is the vegetables, and there's just a little bit of the syrup around it, so I don't get too concerned about such things. Want to make sure for this that you use a very large pot, because you are going to be adding in all of your vegetables into this pot and letting them simmer for a few minutes. So this you want to bring to a boil. Turn my canner down. I will finish chopping up these pickles. This looks like a massive bowl, and it is a big bowl, but these will shrink down quite a bit once we add the salt and the weight on the top. A third of a cup of pickling salt. So I'm going to put a little bit more because I have a slightly larger batch here, and then sprinkle that over the top of your pickles, and then give it a good mix. So your onions and your cucumbers are all well coated with salt. And then once you have this well mixed, put a plate, or in this case I'm actually going to use a round pizza pan. And then it's a good opportunity to clean up, because one of the things about canning, at least in my world, is it completely takes over my kitchen. And yeah, it's better now, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That is true. It is much easier now that I don't have tiny little ones running around. But I give all of these little bits to either my pigs or my chickens. Okie. So what I just did here is I just stuck a pot full of water on the top of here to weigh it down. And then you'll notice that this has shrunk quite a bit. Yes, honey. So there is quite a bit of water in here. So I'm just gonna run this through. Can you grab the strainer for me under there, please, honey? Thank you. Quickly. Okay, so now I just let the pickles drip out into the sink. And then dump them back into here. And then you want to bring your spices and your vinegar and your sugar up to a boil. Did I mention that I decided not to add the extra cauliflower? Because once I put it in here, the ratios looked right to me. So you see how you can't see any of the brine here? Just trust that as this cooks down a little bit, there will more water will release from your pickles, and you'll end up with enough brine in the end. Okay, I just want to give you an example of what you're looking for color. So you can see how this one is bright green, and then this one is kind of a yellowish color. This one's starting to turn really fast, but can you see the difference between the two of those? You are going for this yellowish color, and once they're all that color, then they're ready to jar up. Okay, you can see here how much more liquid is in this than there was before, so there's going to be more than enough brine for these pickles. Okay, so this is the easy part, just putting the pickles into the jar. With this, you want to leave, with everything pretty much that you're gonna can, you wanna leave head space, and that's the space between the lid and the product. And usually it's like ½ an inch or so is usually pretty good. So I'm just gonna push this down, cram these in here. You wanna make sure that you have enough brine to cover everything up nicely. And then because this is quite a lot of sugar, where did you put that bowl, honey? Bowl with a little bit of vinegar and water and a clean cloth, and just dip it in like this and wipe. When you put your lids on your jars, you want to do them just finger tight, so you don't want to reef them on. Just give them a little twist and then stick them in your canner. These will only be canned for 10 minutes. Pickles usually don't need to be canned for terribly long. And then just repeat it for all of your jars. So I have 7 quarts in the canner and probably 2 more to go. So this is a 9-quart recipe. Making pickles is one of the easiest and foolproof ways to can, and I think it's a really good thing for first-time canners to do, because the chance of there being any risk as far as safety is very, very low, because you're using such a high level of vinegar, and that kills off any botulism spores. So I would highly recommend giving pickles a try as your first round on canning if you are new to it, and if you're not, this recipe is a really awesome one. All right, that is it for me today. I will see you guys soon. Bye.